All right, so we're going to get started. Welcome, everyone. Today's discussion is around your data versus your annual plan. And that actually sounds a lot more adversarial than I think I meant it to sound. It sounded great in my mind, but because of course we don't want your database team, your data, and your leadership who are making the plans at odds. We want that to be very harmonious, and that's really what we're going to focus on today. So I'm Marlisa Post. I'm a database specialist with Donor Database Experts, and I'm very excited to welcome our three panelists today. So joining us, we have Bridget Martin, and Bridget is a passionate leader who is dedicated to building connections and driving meaningful change. As a director of development at the Child Advocacy Center of Greater Rochester, she leads fundraising efforts to support children and families in need. With over 2 decades of experience in nonprofit leadership, finance, and business development, Bridget has excelled in strategic partnerships and community engagement. She has held key roles at Monroe Capital Inc., Genesee Regional Bank, and Dollinger Travel. A dedicated volunteer, she supports organizations like the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society and Ronald McDonald House. Her leadership earned her recognition as a 2019 Athena Award finalist. Bridget thrives on collaboration and believes in the power of relationships to create lasting impact. So welcome, Bridget, and thank you. Next, joining us, we have Andy Powers. And Andy Powers serves as the Chief Development Officer of the YMCA of Greater Rochester, and he is in his 15th year with the organization. With over 20 years of experience in development, Andy has held roles in higher education, healthcare, and within a small nonprofit agency. He discovered the importance of data-informed fundraising while managing a college annual campaign and its student call center. He has since applied those insights to multi-million-dollar campaigns as both a campaign manager and a gift officer. Andy is a member of the North American YMCA Development Organization Council and a service delivery partner supporting YMCA fundraising across the United States. So welcome, Andy. And Jenny. Jenny Hubbard offers a hard-won wisdom and powerful example of resilience in the face of unimaginable loss. Her daughter, Catherine, was one of the first-grade children lost in the 2012 Sandy Hook tragedy. Today, Jenny serves as president and CEO of the Catherine Violet Hubbard Animal Sanctuary, which, under her leadership, has grown from a grassroots vision into a nationally recognized organization and model for building human empathy through animal welfare and environmental education. She led the sanctuary through the legislative process that secured its 35-acre property from the state of Connecticut, laying the foundation for a multi-million-dollar capital build and long-term sustainability. Jenny has since guided the sanctuary's expansion from statewide senior pet care programs to a new education center to support educational programming that welcomes thousands each year. She is also an award-winning author whose writing on loss, faith, and forgiveness has inspired readers across the country. She and the sanctuary have been featured on The Kelly Clarkson Show and were honored with the American Business Awards 2025 Nonprofit of the Year, where Jenny was also named a Nonprofit Thought Leader of the Year. A graduate of Randolph-Macon Women's College with a degree in art history and communications, Jenny was recognized with the 2021 Alumni Achievement Award for her work advancing compassion as a social movement. She lives in Bethel, Connecticut with her husband, Mark. So welcome to our three panelists. We are so excited to have you here. So let's start talking about the big picture, which of course is what planning is all about. And the three of you as leaders sort of need to live in that space. So Jenny, I'll actually start with you. Can you tell me a little bit about your approach when you are developing your annual or your long-range plan? What metrics do you think about? What other factors come into play for you?
So I usually start with the organization and setting a long-term vision. So talking about what community impact might look like and what resources we might need in order to make our mission meet the impact that we foresee. And so a lot of that is just alignment operationally, making sure that our staff and the team here at the ground roots is part of that vision setting all the way up to the board. And then once we have a vision in place, then we work backwards in terms of what are the resources that we need to make that vision come to reality. Is it staffing? Is it additional people? Is it money? And then going about putting the steps as to getting those tools in place. So it's a long-term planning process that at each level comes back to alignment of all of the key people that are part of setting that vision and then making it happen.
Wonderful. So Andy, same question. Where do you begin when you're long range planning? What metrics are you looking at? What else are you thinking about?
Yeah, so I think data as a whole is kind of an interesting thing for a lot of us that are out asking for gifts and fundraising kind of face to face and serving in major gift officer roles because it's not necessarily where our minds are all the time. A lot of times I'm thinking about the person sitting in front of me and the opportunity to share with them. So I say that to make the point that it's kind of a muscle that I need to exercise when I'm thinking about data. And so I'm looking at it oftentimes more from like the behavior of our donors. So what can we look at in the past and see what are our donors doing, and how do we use that to make the plans for the future? So things like how often are they giving? Are they increasing their gifts year over year? What's the recency of their latest gift? So when you start to put the picture of the individual together and then build that out, and I say one at a time, and I know that's unrealistic to think that we're going to build out 1,000 donors one at a time, but when you think about it in those terms, it does help to kind of make a more solid plan that is based not just on what feels right, but what we actually see and the data is showing us is right. So making that plan to me is particularly important because it just keeps us honest, right? It keeps us thinking about a specific goal, or really several goals to make sure that we're following that as we move throughout the year. If you don't do that, then you're kind of just throwing darts in the dark, I think is the saying, and that probably doesn't seem terribly safe.
Great. And Bridget, same question.
So I would say it's a little bit of both of what Jenny and Andy said. When we're coming together to figure out what our strategic plan is, whether it's for 5 years or 3 years, I'm a big believer in looking backwards so we can learn what worked and what didn't. And then also that data and that information guides us along with what our vision and our mission are. And again, to Jenny's point about alignment, it always has to be in alignment with what our goals are. For us, it's, helping the children and families in our community that have been victim of physical abuse, sexual abuse, or witness to a violent crime. So we always have that in the forefront of our mind, and that drives everything that we do. So when you look at, for instance, if your data told you that one particular initiative wasn't that great, then maybe we reframe what our strategy is for moving forward on that in the next 5 years. Do we need to have more assistance with staffing for certain programs? Do we need to have more space to house the people that are working here? Like, what are all those things? And so I think a lot of that data and those analytics from past dictate that and help us formulate what works going forward.
Well, I think the commonality I noticed among all your answers was, putting people first. And I think for some of us who live in a data space where, it's constituent number 1532 and not Bob Smith, that's such a wonderful reminder for us that, behind every one of those data points, there's a person and a person who's invested in your organization. So I love hearing that from all of you. So we know, as I was just saying, that, sometimes the data people and the other people sort of speak different languages, it almost seems like. You're talking people and programs, and we're talking AI and queries and metrics. So how do you get everyone as a leader speaking the same language? Because in a way, you are the conduit between your teams, including those data people, and, for example, your board, who, is not even necessarily of your space. So how do you do that? How do you get everyone onto the same page with the same vision? And Andy, I'm actually going to start with you for this.
Yeah, of course. So, I often will say that our goals are kind of an us problem, right? So when we think about like our long-term goal for fundraising, if it's an annual appeal or if it's a capital campaign or anything like that, that's really something that we need to focus internally on as staff and as leadership, that's what we're driving towards. When it comes to sharing that out with our volunteers, with our teams, we need to, just to your point, coalesce around things that make sense to us. And so when we think about that, we try to look at volume as a key indicator. We can say that we have X number of potential prospects, and we believe that that number can lead to Y number of donors or the amount that we think we can raise from that group. That starts to put into context what the end result is going to be. So anytime that we're talking about those various elements, like we have so many live ones, or we have so many side bunts, or we have a goal to increase or upgrade so many donors, when we can make those into real numbers that are going to feed into the dollar goal, that really gives us the opportunity to say, if we do these things, we feel very confident that the result is going to be the dollar goal that we're trying to reach. So trying to, I guess I would say, build the foundation by showing what that's going to lead to. That's really what helps us here.
Great. And Bridget, so how do you bridge that gap?
So a little bit similar. I think the best way that you get buy-in from people that aren't maybe necessarily data focused is to show them results. So if you, for instance, with one campaign, what we did is had certain coding that came in if a donor was donating through online or whether it was a piece of mail. There were different codes with that and different pages that they would go and donate to. So then we could go back and look and say, okay, can we actually be saving money on mailings because the people that are writing checks are less? It's like it's looking at all of those pieces and then being able to present that to your board or other leadership and say, this is how we can have some cost savings, which also I think we all know that sometimes as you reduce expenses, that can also be a benefit in driving revenue. So it's just looking at all the pieces.
Right. And Jenny, how do you sort of navigate all this?
What I have found has been most successful and where we've hit our pitfalls is when we all don't align on what is the definition. And so when we set out our goals and we say, this year our fundraising goal is X, Y, and Z, and here's the measurements that we're going to look at, and don't clearly define why are we looking at those and where are we getting those numbers from, then everybody starts looking at impact in a different way, and pulling from different resources. And then there becomes a big question mark around, well, where did you get that number? And impact then becomes a debate on where numbers came from versus using data as a decision point. And so for me, it's making sure that everybody is clear on what the goal is, clear on where we're understanding whether or not we've met our goal, and how do we define the tools that we're going to use, and to use a often overused term, we're all singing out of the same hymn book in terms of where we're going.
Right. And actually, Jenny, I really love that where you're talking about instead of maybe focusing on the plan and the numbers, people start to focus on where do the numbers come from, how do the numbers come from. And so, Bridget, I'm first going to throw back to you. have you run into that situation where either, broader leadership or the board or even your team have really kind of gotten in the weeds about, well, where did this number come from? Why this number? Can we trust this number? And if that has happened, what do you do?
Yep, that sure has happened. And I would say what we do is it's a little bit about what are your strategies and what are your processes around communicating numbers. So there are definitely some policies in place to make sure that whatever numbers we are using, it's kind of like if you're pulling things from the database, it's garbage in and garbage out, right? So you have to first of all, make sure who's ever inputting information into your database, when we're talking about a donor database, that's accurate. It's not going to a foundation versus the person, or however, that those things are all set up accurately. And then once we have the reports that we need or the information and we know that it is accurate, we have a policy here that it has to be signed off by a VP. And then anything that's going like in an annual report or out to the public has to be signed off by the CEO. So that way you've really got a lot of buy-in all the way across so that you don't run into the what Jenny, you were just describing, because I think at some point in our careers, everyone has been there. So it's that looking back so that when you look forward, we all learn our best information from mistakes that are made, right? So that way, when you have those kind of guidelines around numbers and information, I think it prevents that from happening in the future.
Yeah.
Andy, what about you? Have you experienced anything like this?
So I'm not sure that I'll connect the dots exactly, but I'll try. So I think that it's important that we can prove that these things work. And so I'd use an example of something such as the number of stewardship touch points you might want to have in a year. So I think usually we'd probably say 7 stewardship touch points is kind of the standard. And so we can use our data and say, this donor had those 7 touch points and actually increased their gift year over year. This donor had 2 touch points and they didn't give this year. This donor had 4 and they renewed their gift at their same level. When we can get deeper into that type of data and show that to our teams, then it becomes an understanding that this work that we do is actually going to drive the outcomes. And so I think that becomes really the challenge for us, is that it's easy to every day say, I'm going to call this person, I'm going to write a letter to this person, have a meeting with them. But when I can look back at the system and say, those things resulted in us raising more money, then we're able to bring that to our teams, to our boards, to show these are the things that really matter. And, I made the point earlier about our goals kind of being an internal problem. What I also want to share on that element is when we measure the things that we know make a difference, that's how we start to make a difference. I know, really mind-blowing stuff there, right? But just this idea that if we're saying we need to make sure we're tracking our actions, and then all of a sudden you track your actions and there's great results out of that, guess what? We're going to track our actions more often. And so it's just kind of this cycle that we need to actually do the things that we know are going to have results, but then measure them. Because when you start to measure them, that's really what's more important. And I would even go so far as to say, and I'm sure there'd be varying opinions on this, but we often measure the kind of the outcome, the dollar goals and that sort of thing. If we're measuring the quality engagement that we have with our constituents, with our prospects, with our donors, that's probably going to be a better indicator of our success even than our final number. So to me, that's all a different way to look at data, as opposed to just using our databases as a reciprocal for and a repository for gift transactions. It needs to be more than that to really get more out of it.
That's a really great point. Jenny, are you at all using your database right now, aside from just a repository, as Andy said? How are you measuring touch points in the database? Is it an external thing? How do you measure those donor interactions?
It's actually what Andy was just saying is truth. on our end of the organization, because we're somewhat of a newer organization, only 10 years into this. But what we're realizing is exactly that. When we start measuring touch points or deliverables, even notes that are more of the human side of the donor, the results, they come. And by measuring and saying, grant reports are due, or, just this morning, it was an entry of the baby's due in July. Being able to use that as a way to cultivate relationships versus just capturing data, is already paying off for us.
That's wonderful. Yeah, Bridget, for you, how do you, measure those interactions, track those so they don't get lost in the noise of the numbers?
Yeah, I think that's a very easy thing to happen, but I think it's very accurate that the more connection you have and the more genuine connection you have, because donors aren't stupid. They fully feel a genuineness if that's what you're expressing. And if you have a donor, I read this report once where some of your biggest like gifts once someone passes away come from those donors that gave maybe 25 or $100 a year. So you, in my mind, and the way I operate is you look at all your donors as if they're $1 million donors, and you have to engage with them accordingly, not because you think someday they will be, but whatever they're giving to you for your organization, that could be all that they can give at that time. And that $25 they're giving could be the same as that $1 million someone else is giving. And so I think when you show true gratitude and appreciation, and maybe you meet with them for coffee or whatever it is, just spend a little time. And I know everyone is busy and we're all trying to do all the things. We work in spaces where that's the norm. But I think those things absolutely pay off, and it would be easier if we could measure that. I know that we can put the notes in and say the things, and I do the same thing that both of you do and have those notes in there that, when a wedding's coming or a baby's due or whatever it is, so that you can then follow up. It would be great if there was some mechanism to say A plus B equaled C.
Yeah.
And what I would just add to it is, it's probably part of the reason we have to focus on those larger donors is just because there's not enough of us. So we have to say, you know what, this group is the group that we need to spend our time on. But what if, to your point, Bridget, if we could take some of that data and say, we know that this is the makeup of somebody that probably has the capacity for a significant estate gift. And whatever that might be, if we could start to calculate that or review that on an annual basis, that's only going to drive our focus a little bit more. And I think the other thing on that too is how can we then pull in more people under the umbrella to help support our stewardship and our cultivation? Like, I can't imagine that you would have the time to meet with all those $25 donors, but what if you have some volunteers or some board members or some other staff that can be doing that? Because then you're using your data because you know that there's a possibility that these people could have something more. There's also the possibility that they gave $25 once, we're never going to see them again. But instead of using your time, how do we spread that out a little bit more? And that's a real opportunity, I think.
That's a great point. Yeah, thank you. So one thing that you sort of alluded to, Bridget, was talking about looking at your metrics and, for example, seeing that they might be saying that the method of reaching out to donors maybe needs to be examined. Is mail not the way to go anymore? Or do you still have people sending checks in? And so one of the things I would love to talk about a little bit is, the new, because we all know technology is changing so quickly. It seems now like it's not even year over year, it's month over month, and things are changing. So how do you balance that? And Bridget, I'll start with you, but then go around. Because of course, everything seems shiny new and exciting. Should we be using AI? Should we be, doing everything online? How do you, as someone who needs to, again, of the big picture, balance that impulse to want to do all the new things with keeping it grounded with what your donors and your organization needs.
Yeah, and I think that's where data can help a little bit because you can look and see how are people giving? Are they giving online? Are they, scanning a QR code? Are they writing a check? What is it that they're doing? And then we need to react to that. So I don't think you can ever have a fundraising philosophy that one size fits all because it never will, because you're always going to have your I'll just use an example of like a 20 something that wants to scan the QR code and make the donation, and you have your more than 20-year old someone who wants to still write a check. So you need to be mindful of that. And I think there's ways by using data to gear your communication to different segments of your constituencies.
That's great. Jenny, what about you? How do you balance sort of the urge to make everything techie with keeping it grounded for what makes sense for your organization?
Well, like Bridget, using the data to trend and chart trends, but also using the data as a place to capture pilots, and being able to play around with, the emerging. Was this campaign something as simple as, was it all digital and we used a QR code? And is there a way to have a space in the data to be able to measure that against a control model, or how we were doing our fundraising all along? But checking in with that data and having a consistent report that stays the same so that you can start charting trends, because it may shift from the whole check writer that you don't want to miss out on it. But you also don't want to jump at the first shiny blingy thing that you see.
Right. And Andy, how about you? How do you with your crew balance that?
And we are far from perfect from it, so I'm not even going to pretend that we're doing it exactly the way that we could and should. But the thing that comes to mind is that, any for-profit company wouldn't dream of just, sending something out to the masses without really thinking about how those people that they're reaching out to are going to engage with that information, whether it's an ad or whatever it is. And so I think that certainly resources become the question as nonprofit agencies. We're invested in our communities, not necessarily invested in having the absolute top of the line technology that can drive these things. But where is the balance for us? And I think that's something we should really think about, because what if we spent a little more time in preparing our next solicitation to make sure that it's really highly segmented, that the people that gave digitally are only getting requests digitally, the people that gave through the mail are only getting requests through the mail. If we spend that extra time up front, in theory, we're going to save money because we're not spending money on sending useless, mail pieces. And also, we probably are going to engage those donors in a more meaningful way. So I think this to me is more about taking a moment to spend a little of that extra time up front to see what we can figure out with the information that we have. And to everyone's point, the more we collect, the better off we're going to be. And that truly, I think, becomes the biggest question. What metrics or what things are we capturing, and what systems do we have in place to capture that information?
Two of you actually mentioned QR codes, and I think this is an interesting place to jump into the next thing that I want to talk about, which is actually failure. If you know aware of who Adam Savage is, Mythbusters, he says failure is always an option. And with QR codes, it's an interesting case because when they were first developed, back in the, I'll say early to mid 2000s, they seemed like they were going to be the next big thing. Nonprofits, would spend money on huge billboards that, you could see from the road. And as you're driving your car, you're going to scan the billboard. But it seemed like something that they were everywhere, and people were going to love them. And they actually failed pretty badly. In fact, one big sort of influencer, not influencer, but thought person around marketing, social media, wrote a book called QR Codes Kill Kittens, because this was such a such a use case at the time of something that just went off the rails. However, the pandemic, truly what saved the QR code because of using it on menus, and we all got comfortable with it. And now we do maybe use it on our buck slips and use it for all different things. So think of that, not necessarily QR codes, but think about a time when you thought something was going to be a great idea. Maybe the data even told you it was going to be a great idea, and it was not a great idea. So if you can think of something like that in your organization, and what did you learn, and were you able to pivot, or sort of what were your takeaways? And so, Jenny, I'll start with you. Does anything come to mind around around that? It's a safe
Lot.
space, Jenny. It's okay.
My background is not nonprofit. And so as Andy said, from a corporate perspective, I think about our impact to communities in terms of that's our product. And so we did a campaign that was all social media driven. It was ads based. We wanted to increase our recurring gifts, our monthly donors, and we got one. It was a flop because we didn't take the time. I mean, what's trending is ads, and we wanted to get the generation of new givers into our database, and we just didn't take the time to just stop and think through, like, what exactly does this population of giving want from us? And it's not a shiny ad, it's transparency and how their money's being used to support our mission. And we chalked it up as needing to pause before we launch these campaigns. I think we spent $200 or $300 on it, so it wasn't a huge loss, but a loss nonetheless.
Absolutely. It also makes me think of several years ago when it was every fundraiser's nightmare when their board would come to them and be like, "What's our ice bucket challenge? How do we go viral?"
Right.
Andy, how about you? What any failures or that you've learned from?
Happy to say we've literally never had a failure, which so it's really happy to be able to share that with this group. No, of course. And so, this gets to be a little bit unique with who we are and what we do as an organization here. And that is we do a lot of things. And so we serve people that are 6 weeks old to people that are 106 years old. So, and within that continuum, there's all different ways in which we're providing service. So our challenge often is how do we capture the right message from our constituency data? So not necessarily our current donors. We feel pretty good that once we have them as donors, we can do the right things to keep them as donors. But it's for us, it's really the challenge is about the right message for donor acquisition. And so, honestly, we probably rarely get it right. Like it's a very difficult thing for us to get the right message to the right people. So it's always a work in progress. We're looking at things like AI right now to say, like, how can we use AI to help us describe what the donor profile looks like for a YMCA potential donor based on their activity, their engagement with the organization. And so I think until we find that answer, and maybe we never will, I think we just have kind of come to accept there's going to be failure in this space. Donor acquisition is always going to be a challenge for us, but we'll keep trying. We never stop trying, for sure.
Absolutely. Bridget, how about you?
Well, first, I want to say, Andy, when you figure that out, will you let Jenny and I know? Yeah, that donor acquisition piece is a tough one. I think from a failure perspective, it's hard for me to say like, oh yeah, this thing was an epic failure. I would say that we have a conference that we do, and when you are marketing for a conference, it's very different than when you are marketing for an event. So pivoting and using some different tools and different methods that were done for the conference, and then to not see the results that you had hoped for. I think that was a little bit of a, like a misstep and a learned from experience. Like, how do we how do we do this going forward? And again, that piece of it also falls back to data. I think we had, everyone got excited and said, oh my gosh, we had this many more people come to the conference this year. And then you drill down on everything and you're like, well, we had that many, but we spent X more to get those people. So was our net really what we wanted it to be? So I think part of any missteps or failures is just learning from it and figuring out how to pivot and do the right thing next time. We had a leadership meeting not long ago, and the moderator of it said, her favorite statement is, what's the next right thing? And I just think that's kind of what we all take away when there is a failure, like what's the next right thing to do?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. I think it's a great way to turn it around and find the positive there. So I want to talk a little bit about with each of you what your level of involvement is with your database, because certainly that varies organization by organization and can depend on size, the things you're very busy on doing. So are you a direct user with your database, or are you more requesting information from your staff? Is it a mix of both? Andy, we'll start with you. What's your day-to-day interaction with the database like?
Yeah, of course. I feel very lucky to, you mentioned working like in the call center with the students.
Mhm.
So going way back doing that work, I feel very lucky to have been really highly engaged with our database, getting to a point with that I was really able to do whatever I needed to get the information that I needed for the work that I was doing. So that really set a foundation for me that, for better or worse, 20 years later, I still can do it. So it's a challenge for me to sometimes not do it, and to ask for that help. And I've gotten better with doing it. The reality is that I think sometimes we conflate the idea that if someone is entering information, that they're best suited to also pull that information out and to manipulate it and to work with it. And so I think when we're building our teams, we need to think about that. Those don't necessarily have to be the same thing. They can be. And, obviously, we're all organizations of different sizes and different resources are available. But I do think it's important that leadership knows and understands at least a baseline of what's possible. But thinking about how we can employ folks to really support that work. Because if we don't do that, then we're going to get mired in it. I think when the fundraisers are mired in that, I don't know that that's the best recipe for success.
Right. Bridget, how about you?
So direct user, and will ask for staff to do some things too, but very much to Andy's point, just because I can do it doesn't mean I should be the one doing it. So I really am working very hard. It's a goal for 26 to really keep myself a little bit further removed from that and have other folks learn that a little bit more and spend more of my time out with donors and doing the things I really need to be doing to help continue success here. So it is good to know that if I need to do it, I can, or I can just call DDX and they will help me. But I would say a little bit of both, but with the goal to make it less of me and more of others.
Great. And Jenny, how about you?
Same. I love data. I love to look at it and figure out what's happening and try to understand how we can move forward. That being said, I agree, it's not the best use of my time. So we have a rule here that if we're asking for data or reports, the number one question is, why do you need it? And what are you going to do with it? And if it makes sense and it aligns with our mission and our strategies and our goals, then often what will happen is a report will be set up in the system for me that I can go in and push a button and it will run and give me exactly what I'm looking for. But again, to Andy and Bridget's point, having the right person that's doing that and being able to say, here's the information, I think is what is most important. And then defining what it is that we're looking at, so that it's not busy work. I could look at numbers all day long, but it's not going to help the end goal.
I think we've all gone down those data rabbit holes at
Yeah.
some point of why am I seeing this? And you really have to stop yourself. One of the things that Andy touched on was about the person entering isn't maybe the best suited to be pulling it out. But I want to talk a little bit about the data entry piece and data quality, because Jenny, I think you were also the one who said garbage in, garbage out, which is a old tenet of data and so true, still so true today. So, how do you make sure that your team is getting the data in correctly? What safeguards do you have in place? Bridget, you talked about it a little bit, but I'd love to dive deeper. Are there non-negotiable rules? Are there reviews that are put in place? So sort of how are you doing that? And actually, Bridget, I will start with you.
Sure. I mean, we have, after we did a massive data cleanup several years ago, we really wanted to ensure that the database stayed clean. So there are definitely rules around if this gift comes in, there's very specific campaign fund appeal package, very specific. And if there's a question about it, the person entering it knows who to ask and who to get the right answer. But there's definitely a form to follow to understand that. And it's also the partnership with the development team and the finance team. So really making sure that there's those frequent touch points of, whether they're pulling a open pledge report and you're pulling a audit report, whatever the reports are that you are using, that you're doing those frequently so that you can see if there's some miscoding on your end or on finance's end or however that's working, so that those can be remedied in real time and you're not spending the month of December recoding all your gifts and trying to figure out what bucket that should be in instead of that one. So I really do think it has a lot to do with having structure in place on how you want gifts entered, and then following up and making sure that you are running reports to ensure that the data is exactly what you want it to be for entries for donations and gifts.
Great. Jenny, how about you? How do you sort of keep the quality control up?
So we define who has access and roles and responsibilities, who's entering, who's pulling, what are you doing and what's your role? And then having clear definitions to how things are going in, how data is being coded and logged, and then checks and balances. So having those monthly reports that are able to flag inconsistencies or changes has helped us keep our data clean and consistent.
Great. And Andy, what do you do at the Y with your team to keep everything fairly clean?
Yeah, I would just agree. I mean, it can go bad so quickly, I mean, with all great intentions, if you say just for 1 month, you know what, I'm not going to worry too much about those packages. All of a sudden, you've got hundreds of gifts or hundreds of transactions that you're trying to clean up. So, staying on top of it is the biggest thing for us. And if you're not staying on top of it, to Bridget's point, you probably at some point are going to have to do some sort of major data cleanup. And, that's much worse than taking an extra 5 minutes in every gift to do the things that need to be done. It's really about discipline. And I think what's very hard, and I don't know if everyone here agrees, well, probably some as data folks, that like we as fundraisers, I think really lean into the art side of things, right? The relationship and I'm the worst of all of that. I would agree. And I know I have staff on here that probably would agree as well, that I just want to, build the relationship and make our donors happy and have that experience with them and have them support the organization. But if we're all doing that and we're not taking the science part of it seriously and the data part of it seriously, it just all falls apart. And so I think that it's a discipline and it's an attitude that this is important. And if that's not being perpetuated throughout the entire team and the organization, then you're just going to fall apart without the good data.
Great. All right, and I have two final questions, but if any of our attendees have questions that they would also like to ask, please feel free to use the Q&A box to do so. So for the three of you, has there ever been a metric that you wished that either you had access to or felt like you needed it, whether you're reporting to your board or something like that, but it was a metric that you just, either felt like you couldn't get out of your data, or just felt like it was really fuzzy. Anything that would be sort of on your data wish list. And Jenny, I'll start with you.
I don't know if it's even accomplishable. I know that a lot of the work that we do is trying to qualify quantitative data. So we know we serve X number of people, and we know intuitively that what we do is transformed into some type of impact that betters them as an individual or as a community. And I'd love something that would show that quantitatively. And I don't know if that's ever accomplishable, but it would be great to be able to pull a report and show it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Andy, how about you?
Yeah, I think that's what comes to mind for me is the idea of um, being able to measure when the process works. And I know it's simple to say the process works when a gift comes at the end of it, but being able to measure and say when we do various actions and activities that they do move the needle to maybe get a donor more ready to give, or maybe to get a donor get to give it the first time or to renew or to increase. I think trying to say, our efforts are making things easier for us would be really important to me because, at the end of the day, if you can't do that, it's kind of just like black or white. We were successful with a campaign or an appeal, or we weren't. But I think there's more nuance in there. And so anything that we can measure the nuance with is important.
And Bridget, how about you?
Yeah, and I think it's a little bit similar to that. We touched on it earlier, where it would be really nice if you could just measure how um, those touch points impact the actual gift. Like, do they really? And along those lines too, what about all your in-kind giving and your volunteers? Like, how does that translate into the bottom line for an organization? And I know you can pull numbers to say I had this many volunteer hours, and if I had to pay someone, it would be X, Y, and Z. So I mean, there is some of that, but I just think some of those intangibles would be nice to be able to quantify somehow to your bottom line.
Great. All right, and so my final question as an absolutely out and proud nerd, I'm going to ask each of you, what are you excited about that's on the horizon? Things you've heard about, whether it's related to your database or even something else that, might help you day to day with your organization or just help your organization. What tech things that are coming get you excited? And Bridget, I'll start with you.
Oh, geez. I don't know. I just rely on you guys to tell me what the new fun thing is so that then I can get excited about it. So I don't, I mean, I think kind of what's going on with AI and seeing where that's headed, and kind of being able to master it a little bit more and just see where that goes, I think is interesting, specifically maybe in the grant space.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
that's what I would. Sorry, I wasn't too nerdy there.
No, not at all. That's great. Yeah, and Andy, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of touched on it earlier, that idea of to build some predictive models and that sort of thing. Like, how do we get a better idea of who's going to be a major donor? Because I think in our minds, we all have these ideas of what that person in theory looks like. But if we can use some more data, and there's probably AI involved in doing that, to look at huge amounts of data and say, this is the type of person, this is the description of someone that's going to be able to make a major gift. I mean, that would be game changing for us for any given year to say these are the 500 people, these are the 100 people, however many that fit the criteria that have been the last $1 million donors in any city, whatever that might be. Like, if we could get to that point, I think there would be no stopping us. Because the biggest thing for us is the identification process, I think.
Wonderful. And Jenny, how about you?
I agree with Andy and what Bridget was saying, that just to be able to AI, be able to anticipate and work at a faster pace of just narrowing down and who and what's important to them. Not that I want to take the personal side out of things, but just cut into that prospecting time is exciting.
And I think when we talk about AI, which actually happens, that was what our last session was on, so very timely with this. Thinking about how it's not replacing you and that personal touch, it's freeing up your time
Right.
to be able to go out and have that personal touch, and then yes, also hopefully find those perfect donors. Yeah, setting up those predictive models. So yeah, I think for all of us right now, it's that holy grail of figuring out how to make the AI, do those things we want it to do. Because if you've played with AI for any amount of time, you know that sometimes it's a genius and sometimes it's like a bag of rocks. So, it can either be Stephen Hawking or it can be that napkin sitting on your table. So I think, yeah, that's the holy grail for all of us. But you've given me some ideas, so my wheels are turning now. Wonderful. Do you have any other closing thoughts that you'd like to share, Jenny? Anything you'd want to close out with?
Just the importance of using data as a tool versus using it as a way to using it as a part of your toolbox, not as the end all be all, because there's a greater decision-making process that can be data driven, but it's a part of it, not the whole piece of it.
Right. And Andy, how about you? What would you want to close out with?
I think Jenny said it perfectly. It's that marriage of those like the heavy intense operations data side of things and the art of the ask, that putting those two things together, I think is where we find most of our success and will continue to. AI is not replacing us as fundraisers. Not yet, at least. But I think, when we can use that information to be better fundraisers, that's really what the important part of all of this is.
Absolutely. And Bridget, how you? What would you close out with?
Yeah, I would say a little bit of what both Jenny and Andy said, and also just always be curious. Like there's always something new to learn, so just keep open to that. And I want to thank you, Marlisa, and DDX for hosting this and giving us an opportunity. And it was very nice to meet Andy and Jenny here, and just to say thank you for that, and just stay curious.
Thank you. Those are perfect words to close out with. I can't top that. So I'm going to leave it there. For folks attending, I do want to share that our next session is on December 16th. And this one is going to be on forecasting versus fantasy. And this is making your pipeline work for you. So for those of you who work in major gifts, or for those of you who are doing the prospecting or just tracking that major gift data, this will be a great session for you, especially as we're going into the new calendar year and maybe starting to plan out your major gift asks and think about all those big donors. As Andy said, the ones who are somewhere in the database and you just need to use the data to find them. So the recording of this session will be available towards the end of the week. So please look for that email. Also in that email will be a survey. We are planning out next year, so please let us know what would be helpful to you. This is your webinar, and we really want to know what topics would excite you. So again, I want to thank my three panelists. You were all wonderful. This was a great conversation, and hope that maybe we can invite you back sometime.
Sounds great.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.